All right, so I want to welcome everyone to the Growth and Freedom Podcast. This is a podcast for leaders, and typically you have me as your host, and I'm typically the only voice that you hear on the podcast. But as you know, occasionally I bring in authors that I admire, people that I want to talk to that I think would be a great asset to you as a business owner and a leader. And so I'm really excited about today's guest. So I've got Mike Michalowicz, and I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, his name doesn't necessarily need introduction, but it's also possible that some of you guys have never read a book. And so for those of you who haven't, just a brief, just kind of introduction and overview of Mike. My first experience with Mike, for me personally, I started a business in one of the best years that you could start a business, 2008. And I read a book that Mike wrote called The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. And it really resonated with me. It really created some simplicity for me in a time where a lot of people were asking me to write a business plan and you need to go through all these hoops and have a pro forma. And I just felt like, I don't even know if this is going to work. This could be like a stupid idea. Maybe I suck at this. I don't even know if I can do it. So I didn't want to invest a lot of time, effort, and energy in things that I didn't think were going to move the needle. And when I read The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, I realized like, okay, I don't know who Mike is, but I like what he has to say. And so I'm going to follow his advice. And I'm glad I did. I took a more simplistic approach to my business to get it launched. And I didn't feel like I wasted a lot of time in that process. Now, for a lot of our listeners, one of the most popular books that I've heard my clients talk about over the last little bit has been Profit First. So clients are always asking me, hey, have you read Profit First? Are you familiar with Profit First? So Mike is the author of Profit First. He's written a lot of books that really just are geared towards how do we simplify entrepreneurship. And I really love that because one of our core values in business is simplicity. That's one of the things that we work towards and that we're trying to accomplish. So Fix This Next is what we're going to talk about today. That's the new book that's coming out. And so I'm really excited about that. So Mike, I'm going to stop rambling here and just thank you for being on the show.
Oh, it's my joy. And I just want to reciprocate and say thank you so much for having me. And thanks for bringing simplicity to entrepreneurship. It is so needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just start just some real basics here. Fix This Next. Let's just jump right into Fix This Next. I've gone through the book. I took my assessment.
Nice.
What kind of prompted this as kind of your next, entryway into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's something I didn't expect to write, but how it came about was I email my readership every so often when I'm starting a book. I'll email them and ask them, what's the biggest challenge you're facing, expecting, a marketing challenge or hiring or whatever. Well, I sent out this one email, and admittedly, I'm not the most technically savvy guy. I sent out this email. I must have sent it out twice or three times in one day by accident. And what the question said was, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in the year ahead? And some people, the same person, would answer the same question multiple times, because I sent it multiple times, with different answers. Their biggest annual challenge in the morning was sales, and then by the afternoon it was in bringing about systems, and in the night it was hiring. And that's when I had the realization that the biggest challenge business leaders and entrepreneurs face is knowing what their biggest challenge is. That became the inception of this book.
Love that. I love that. So early on, you said something in the book that I thought was just so important for entrepreneurs to understand. And it had to deal with intuition, right? So as human beings, we have human intuition that protects us from danger and allows us to make decisions that, hopefully serve us, not always, but hopefully they do that, right? Yeah. But in a business, you mentioned this, you just said, hey, look, businesses, they don't have an intuition. So a lot of times, as you kind of mentioned there and alluded to, we try to make gut decisions about our business, as entrepreneurs, and oftentimes that leads us astray. Talk to my listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's all about our neurological wiring. So you and me, Brandon, all humans, right? We have different sensories like sight, hearing, touch. So if you and I are walking down like a dark alley and we're like, something's not right here, we should turn around. That's our gut instinct that's being triggered by the input signals. Something doesn't seem right. Doesn't look right. Doesn't smell right. I'm hearing weird noise. The thing is, we're not neurologically wired into our business. Yet many business leaders and owners say they are. They don't say those exact words, but they say, I trust my gut. I saw Facebook ads are working right now. I need to do Facebook ads. Or no, we need to hire a rainmaker. No. And we constantly make these assumptions, but that's all they are. They're assumptions. They're not instinctual because we're not wired into our business. So we can use those assumptions as a beacon, but we need empirical data to back it. What I developed in Fix This Next is a compass, if you will. I call it the business hierarchy of needs that points to the true north. And by going through a quick evaluation, we can pinpoint what our business truly needs from us. And then we can resolve it and then do the same analysis, find the next need, and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned this in the book, but you mentioned the book A Goal, sorry. And that kind of reminded me of this as I was kind of going through that. I've read Velocity as well. I think it's by the same group. Theory of constraints, lean methodology. How much of that kind of stuff really influenced just the ideas and thoughts of Fix This Next?
Yeah, well, those books had significant influence. The Goal specifically, other books too. So The Goal was written by a guy named Eli Goldratt. And what he was doing was studying the manufacturing process. And as I'm reading this, I had the realization that at the end of the day, every business is a manufacturer, not in the traditional sense, of course, but we're all creating something. Maybe we're creating an emotion or a sensation or an experience for a client, or maybe we're producing some kind of report or final direction, but we're all creating something. And of course, traditional manufacturing is making a product. What Eli Goldratt argued in The Goal is that in the process, at any point, the slowest element of that process dictates the performance of the entire process. It's like a chain. Like if you and I had a big chain between the two of us and we start pulling it to see where the chain will break, it will break, but it always breaks the same spot, the weakest link. And therefore, we can try to manipulate it, and I pull harder, and you give a little bit, and then I give, and you pull harder. It won't influence where it breaks because the weakest link determines the strength of the entirety of the chain. Therefore, the opportunity is you only need to strengthen one link, the weakest one, and the entire chain strengthens. The mistake, though, business owners are making is they keep going link by link based upon gut and instinct and making it stronger, and then they don't understand why the chain breaks so easily still, because you got to find the one thing that's broken or needs to be repaired, the one weak element, and strengthen that, and always go in the sequence. Once the weak one's resolved, find the next one. That's the essence of the theory of constraints. Well, in business, there is a common chain of sequences that every business goes through. Foundationally, every business has a sales component. It's the generation of cash. Every business then has a profit component. It's the retention of cash. It brings stability and longevity to a business. Once that's achieved, there's overall efficiency throughout the organization. That's another key element or chain in this link. Then there's impact, how we're serving our community. And the highest level is called legacy. Legacy is the creation of permanence, where the business is designed to support in a perpetual format as opposed to just dependency on the owner. Those are the 5 main links, if you will, and they need to be satisfied always by focusing on the weakest one, strengthen that, and then go for the next weakest and strengthen that.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, you kind of laid out that hierarchy in the book. And so one of the things that you have as kind of a companion piece to the book is an assessment, right? To just kind of see like, what is that for you? And I think that's so valuable because I think as an entrepreneur, I think about, as we're recording this right now, we're kind of in the middle of COVID-19 and the lockdown. And for some of us, that's freed up a little bit more time. Like I have clients who are dentists who have more time than they probably want right now because their practices aren't open. But for some people, they're still really busy. But for those of us who have time, now it's trying to figure out, well, what do I do with that time? And how do I really be productive with that? And it's so easy, I think, as entrepreneurs to just try 50 different things at one time versus, your philosophy of really honing down on that one thing. Why is that so hard for us to just kind of figure that out?
Because there's a behavioral mechanism that works against us, and it's the sense of relief. They call it the pleasure mechanism. It's a release of dopamine in our mind. When I address an immediate problem in front of me and fix it, I actually have a dopamine, and this is true for all of us, response where it's like, hey, I felt good. So we pursue this constant momentary relief. The consequence, of course, is long-term agony. So most business owners come in and we say, I have a plan for the vision, a vision for the business where I want to take it. But then there's this stream of all these different distractions and apparent issues. I got email, I got the line of questions outside my office, I got that complaining customer. I then abandon my scheduled plan and say, let me just take care of these issues. But it feels good about it because it gives me relief. Took care of that email, that's off my plate. Angry customer, happy again, that feels fantastic. So we constantly get this temporary relief. The consequence is long-term agony because the business becomes more and more dependent upon us. The next client that's upset, well, you have the process now. You know how to save an upset client, save them again, save them again. So we bring this greater dependency on us. So it's weird because we're getting this sense of relief in the moment, but overall putting more burden on us and that we start to suffer. So the way out of it is identifying the one thing the business needs, not all the apparent issues, but what's the one impactful thing, the one thing that'll move us forward. Once we have clarity on what it is, we then allocate time toward it. Now, and I'm not saying when you're fixing one issue, you ignore everything else. Those plates still need to spin. But instead of becoming a plate spinner as a full-time vocation, we're now resolving a core issue, spin some plates, fix that issue. Once that issue is permanently resolved, now it's bringing about permanent momentum. Now we work on the next issue. And the plate spinning ultimately over time goes away and the organization becomes a true definition of entrepreneurship, which is this. Entrepreneurship is not doing work. It's not about going out there and carrying burden on our back and working harder and workaholism. Entrepreneurship is about the choreographing of resources. It's organizing our employees. It's organizing our vendors, our contractors, even the clients themselves to collectively achieve the outcome we envision. We're an organizer of resources and a designer of outcomes, not a doer of all the work.
I love that. It's interesting that you're talking about this too. My podcast episode that precedes this one really talks about, follow through and what happens when we don't follow through. And it's so easy as an entrepreneur and really just as a human being, really to get into shame. We say, well, I'm lazy. I'm not trying hard enough. Yeah. I'm just not focused. And it's really not about that. And it's about sometimes just stepping back and really getting clear on, that next move. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu says that, the defeated warrior goes to battle first and then tries to figure out how to win, where the victorious warrior plans and wins first, then he goes to battle because he's pretty certain on what that looks like. And that's really hard for entrepreneurs, right? It's really hard for a doer, someone who's staked their whole self-esteem and their whole ego in doing, to actually take a step back, assess the landscape, and say, gosh, what is this landscape telling me? And how do I think more thoughtfully about my next move rather than just jumping in, right? I mean, it's just so hard for us to do that.
Yeah, sadly. And it's perpetuated. You hear some authorities in this space talking about how you got to hustle more. You got to grind it out. How badly do you want it? Right. And it's a perverted perception of what entrepreneurship's about. Listen, I'm not saying that you don't have to have a work ethic. You have to be committed. But the way we apply ourselves, that's the consideration. If you're going to be the one digging the hole, you can only dig the hole as deep as you have the effort. If you coordinate the resources of other people to do it, you have an infinite amount of capability. You could dig a hole for a skyscraper. It's funny. I do all these live events now. Right now, it's gone virtual, but these live conferences. And recently, I've been asking people questions, so I have a good sense of how people respond to this. I say, if you had a choice to make $100 an hour or $10 an hour, which would you choose? And people raise their hands. I say that I'd say 99% say $100 an hour, which also kind of puts the question, why does anyone say $10 an hour? That seems like there's a self-loathing or something going on, but okay. So most people raise their hands for $100 an hour. Then I said, okay, who'd rather make $100 an hour on your own effort versus $10 an hour that is on automatic? It just is delivered to you each day. And this is when it switches like to 50-50. Some people are like, $100 is a lot more money. It's 10 times the amount of money. So I'd rather do that, but I got to sweat my way through that. $10 on automatic, that's pretty great because I can be sitting on the beach and every time a $10, every hour, waiter comes by and gives me $10. So it starts flipping. Then I say, what if that $10 an hour could be amplified just through your thought to maybe 20 or 50 or $1,000 an hour? You got to think about how to do it, but you can amplify it. And now you get $1,000 in automatic every hour. Would you rather have the $10 that you can amplify to any number you wish, or only have $100 an hour working your ass off? What would you rather have? And now the entire community goes, well, I want the $10 an hour because I have unlimited potential on that. Well, that's the trajectory of entrepreneurship. It starts off that I got to do all the work, $100 an hour, I got to grind it out. Sadly, most entrepreneurs stay there for the rest of their lives. The next stage is actually empowering others to make $10 an hour. And while it's a step down in income momentarily, there's a massive shift toward freedom because you don't have to do the work. And when you realize that, then it brings the third stage of entrepreneurship, which is the amplification of it. And, I can assure you, Jeff Bezos is not packaging up your order from Amazon, but I can assure you he's making those thousands of dollars an hour for himself, probably more than that, because he thought through the process. We do have to step back and consider how to empower other people and other processes to do things. And one last thing, this is not taking advantage of other people, because some people say, well, I should be digging the hole, not the other person. No, entrepreneurs should be giving the privilege to other people to dig the hole because that's what they want to do. There's a large community that wants to be employed. And sadly, entrepreneurs selfishly say, no, it's my business and I'm going to do all the work. And they actually block out the employment of others who shouldn't be and don't want to be entrepreneurs. There's a small community of business owners, leaders that are just a wacky community. We're the ones who decided, I'm going to start something or build something. We also, I think, have a responsibility to give jobs and employment to people who don't want to start things. So it's kind of selfish too, to do the work when we can give it to others.
Right. Well, and I think about this too. Someone had posed this question to me years ago, and it changed my thought process about money and why I use money. And they asked me, well, what are the best uses of money for you? And as I thought about that, I realized, well, it's time. I want to buy time. And I can utilize my money to buy time, right? Through leverage, which is what you talked about. And I realized, look, there's things that I do that I don't enjoy, that I don't get a lot of satisfaction out of, that for someone else, mowing my lawn is an example of that, where I don't enjoy mowing my lawn. I live on a half acre. It takes me an hour and a half to 2 hours to complete that. Yeah. That's 2 hours I could spend with my family or do something else that I enjoy more. And so, but there's a high school kid in my neighborhood who wants to start a business, who's now tasting entrepreneurship for the first time, and lawn care is where he's going to get his foot in the door with that. And now I'm happy to support that. That helps him. That frees up my time. I love that concept. I think that's so important. So for you, in leverage, right? We talk about utilizing leverage. Now, what I love about Fix This Next is this allows us to leverage in a more intelligent way, as you shared with some examples in your, previous business experiences and things that, you utilize leverage almost to your own detriment, actually really to your own detriment, as the examples that you gave about, the time where you had to lay off some employees and things like that in over leveraging. So, speak to that for entrepreneurs of just how utilizing Fix This Next can really help them be more smart about that kind of process.
Yeah. And we were talking off air right before we started doing this. You said, I with this analysis, and I realized I got a fundamental challenge, even though I've been in business for so many years. And that can kind of be an eye opener. And it was for me. So I thought the longer I was in business that I deserved to be at higher levels within the business hierarchy of needs. And that's not true. All businesses will go through this system by ping-ponging around. Even the mighty Amazon, who I referred to, they may have, before we recorded this 3 months ago, before COVID, they could have been, focusing on impact and legacy. And Amazon itself reverted back to the sales level. They had to redo how they did things. They moved to essential products over the other products. They had just changed the entire model. Well, that's true for my businesses too. And I was before just arbitrarily saying, I need to hire more people, and honestly now in reflection, Brandon, it was ego. I felt great when I would meet with someone and say, I had 30 employees. How many employees you got? It was all ego, but I backfilled that emotion with logic. Well, I need someone doing this project and we got to do this. And I was stretching the company thinner and thinner. I was putting this burden on my profit level that was not sustainable. And, then the day came where I was no longer, I literally ran out of cash and I had to lay off people. Well, now using the business hierarchy of needs, what I realize is as I move up, I keep on having to look back down to the foundation and say, is the foundation adequate to support the level I'm at? What I realize is for my businesses, that business back then should have had maybe 15 employees, not 30. I need to go back to sales and amplify that. So it all works relationally. It's kind of like building a building. If I'm going to build a 5-level structure, you don't start at level 5 and put it in thin air. It collapses on the ground. You have to start at the foundation, but you also don't make the foundation for a skyscraper and put a tool shed above it because that'll collapse within it. It works relationally. An adequate foundation to support the level above it, and that level must be adequate to support the level above it, and so forth. But once I want to build an even bigger structure, I have to go back to the base and strengthen it. And at all times, I have to make sure it's maintained. So at certain points, there'll be fractures in sales. As this pandemic goes through, a lot of businesses have been thrust back into really getting sales done right, reinventing themselves. There's cracks in the foundation. You have to go back to the foundation and you fix it. So we always will be moving around through different levels.
Yeah. It's not a linear process, is it? I mean, it's organic, right? Yeah. I love that. So I'm going to focus a little bit on sales only because when I took the assessment, that was the thing that came up for me. And so selfishly, for my listeners, because they know I'm a selfish person, they are, they'll appreciate this, but I want you guys to read the whole book anyway. So, you can get into this, but I think a lot of people will have, similar challenges. And one of the things that stood out to me as I went through the sales and just thought about this, one of them was really fundamental. The personal lifestyle piece, right? Not the personal lifestyle that we want, but what's the personal lifestyle that helps to bring us comfort. And I think I even remember that. I mean, it's been a while since I read the Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, but I'm pretty sure that was kind of a thought process in that book, even way back then, of just, what do you want from this business and how do you make sure that this business delivers that for you? And what struck me as I went through that is it's been a while since I've actually thought about that. And I have a spreadsheet that I created that kind of shows me kind of what my base level, number really is, but it's been a while since I've actually revisited that and looked at that and really matched that up with our goals. I mean, why did you decide to include that into the sales process? To me, it was a real eye opener, but I'm just
curious. So and I would say it's the most foundational requirement for all business is relating to what we want the business to provide for ourselves. Because that's usually the inception of business. We want a business that gives us personal freedom and financial freedom. Ironically, we rarely achieve either of those. And that's the whole problem. Because once we say that and we start our business, we then focus on arbitrary numbers. We say, you know what? We just need sales of like $100,000 and things should be good. And once we get there, we're like, oh, it clearly was 100, maybe it's $500,000. Oh, no, it's $1 million. That's when life changes. And it's all not true. What we have to figure out first is what we want to do to support our lives. That's why we started this business in the first place as an owner. And then translate what are the sales necessary to support it. There was a company, I put them in the book, called Cottonwood Coffee. And Jacob Limer, he's the founder of the company.
Not a roastery, right? It's not a roastery.
Yeah, he had a roastery, and 2 coffee shops. He had been in business for 13 years. And the calls with him were just a fascinating guy. He calls and says, listen, Mike, I did the analysis. I found that I had a lifestyle congruence problem, meaning the business was not designed around my lifestyle. My lifestyle was becoming designed around my business, the reverse of what should happen. He goes, and the analysis pointed to, but I've been in business for 13 years. So I said, no way, I'm beyond this. I'm too mature for this. He did the analysis again, said, do you have a lifestyle congruence issue? He goes, no, I don't. The third try, he said, I give up. I do it. I'm going to do it. He did it. It took 20 minutes of just really sitting down, doing a quick analysis, what he needs. He called it the Midwestern income. He lives in South Dakota. And he goes, it's a different lifestyle here than perhaps on the East Coast or West Coast. And he figured out his number. Once he knew what the weekly number was, then he translated it back into his business. He says, oh my gosh, I don't need a bigger business. I just simply need a more efficient business. In fact, I need less sales. It's less about the sales. It's more about profit. And I can be nailing this. So he went back to the basics and it gave him this great realization. I think that's what we need to do in our businesses, that is to focus on what we want to support our lifestyle and then allow the right size business to present itself. Yeah. We hear over and over, bigger is better. You gotta be bigger. And that's not true. It's all about having the right size business find you.
Absolutely. And I think his number, if I'm not mistaken, was like 4,000 a month.
4,000.
It was not a big number.
A month.
Right. I was like, I reread that because I thought, did he say a week or was that a month? No, that was a month. Oh, okay. 4,000 a month. That's Midwest lifestyle.
And lifestyle congruence means he just said, if I have 4,000 a month, I'm comfortable. And that's the goal of the business first, is to remove any discomfort or fear for survival. He can pay his mortgage. He can feed his family. He can live comfortably. That's not his aspiration goal. And I think some business owners confuse this. I'd like to have $1 million a year. I like to have, I'd be a billionaire. And we set this superfluous kind of big number out there. And then it's so arbitrary that the company can only do arbitrary numbers to achieve an arbitrary goal. So the starting point is, what do you need to live just comfortably? Then let's associate that with the business. And then we can go to more aspirational things. But let's start with your rooted reality.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it's interesting too how we go through an assessment, we take it, we get a result, we reject it, we take it again, we get the same result, we reject it, we take it again, we get the same result, we finally listen. But it just goes to show that for leaders, and we work with leaders a lot in this
Yeah.
area of just the ego and the self-deception that can occur when we allow our pride and our ego to get in the way of really truly growing. And that's what I love about Fix This Next and just the whole concept, is that it just really helps you just get clear on identifying, like, hey, this really is this is an issue, and now we know where to go with that. But it's funny how we can't accept that all the time.
Yeah, it's funny, right? So being full of ego and pride and stuff, I think we can accept it in regards to just realize that's part of the human journey. We can accept it, but it's not acceptable, right? And I think that's slightly different. We can accept that as part of who we are, but if we allow that to dictate us, it actually prevents us from achieving what we want. When we say it's not acceptable and we're willing to listen and observe, I think that's where growth comes. And listen, I too fall victim to my ego and pride. I actually talk about it in my books. It's like, I got to be successful. I want to show the world my success. And I've been chopped down enough times now that hopefully when ego starts bubbling up, I can pop the bubble myself now. But it is a challenge. And if we let that emotion control us, it can really restrict the potential.
Absolutely. I love that. So obviously you wrote a book called Profit First, Numbers and Metrics. None of this works without measuring. Peter
Right.
Drucker, a long time ago said you can't manage what you don't measure. I think David Dorr, you had a quote in the book from him about measurement as well. And I mean, just speak a little bit about measurement. Why is this so important? And why will this not work if we don't measure the results?
Yeah, once you know what you need to do, the question is, are you now resolving it appropriately? So in David's book, he uses the concept of OKR. I expanded on it a little bit and made a concept I call OMEN, OMEN. It's an acronym just like his system. But I feel for this situation, it's a little more appropriate. There's 4 elements. First of all, we need to set the objective. So say we do have a sales challenge and we're just not have enough clients coming on board. So the objective may be simply, we need more clients. So the goal is more clients. But then we have to go to the M level, which is measurements. Measurements are, well, how do we know we're getting more clients and what identifies a right client? So you may say, I need 2 clients a week, some kind of volume. They need to do so much business with us in dollar figures. So you put measurements around it to see if you have success or not. Most entrepreneurs know, and business leaders know that, but they do is set it and forget it. They simply say, we need more clients. They better be big clients and let's go. And that's it. And a year later, or at some point randomly, they say, oh, how do we do that goal? Oh, it was forgotten. It never happened. It's totally arbitrary. It's the other 2 elements that are critical. E stands for evaluation frequency. This is a calendar event. We must ask ourselves, how frequently are we going to check our progress toward this goal of objective with these measurements? Am I going to check in weekly, which may be appropriate in that case? Should I check in just once a year? Which maybe like, a company like Boeing who builds, a few mega airplanes, that's how they make their money. Maybe a yearly check-in is more appropriate. So check in every second. Well, for many businesses, that's absurd. For Amazon, it's probably relevant. They have a lot of prospect flow. Then we go to N, which stands for nurture. This is another element many business leaders miss out on. And nurture is giving ourselves the flexibility to change the settings that we set in the beginning, because we set an objective and a measurements and even an evaluation frequency based upon our knowledge of that circumstance at the moment. But we may find out there's additional data. Maybe it's not about getting more clients. Maybe it's actually a prospecting issue and we should not focus on getting clients because we're trying to take blood from a stone. We need to get more prospects in. So nurturing is the allowance to evaluate what's going on. And what I suggest in the book is it's best to do this in teams. If an individual sets a goal and objective because of ego and pride, I do this regularly. I say, this is our objective and I believe in it. It doesn't feel like ego or pride, but I believe in it. Well, when there's a team around me, now I get counterpoints and stuff saying, hey, they start poking holes in my philosophy and giving me different perspectives. So often a team of someone that's closest to the problem, someone that manages and is responsible for the outcome are 2 of the minimum necessary people to start really nurturing your objectives, measurements, and evaluation frequency to move this along to the results that best serve the company.
Yeah, I love that. So go back to that and just listen to this. We talk about rhythms and habits a lot in coaching and in this podcast, and that's a rhythm and habit that we want to establish. And like Mike said, for every business and every type of business, there's going to be a different rhythm for how that looks. For some people, weekly reporting might be overkill, but for other people, it's an absolute necessity. For some people, maybe they can get away with monthly, but for some people, they need to have a little bit of a tighter focus there. And kind of going back to the personal lifestyle piece, right? That kind of creates some meaning, right, Mike, to like, where do the numbers come from? Like, where do we start with the numbers? Because they can feel so arbitrary. And this is probably the number one thing that I hear from leaders as to why they don't set goals. They're like, well, I just throw this number out, like, who even gives a shit? Like, I don't even know if it's going to happen. So
right. It's totally random,
yeah.
right?
So yeah, who cares?
Yeah, right. So we have to tie it back to what's the personal impact? Even if you're not invested in the company in the traditional sense, like a shareholder, you are vested in the outcome. So what's it mean to you? If you achieve certain numbers, what's the impact? And maybe there's a personal financial tie-in. I believe that's a very important factor. Not all businesses have that, but maybe there's an emotional thing, or it's a way to climb the ladder for larger corporations. But we have to understand our vested outcome in achieving certain goals. And then it becomes much more viable, much more tangible.
Yeah, I love that. And that's so important too. I had a guy I talked to years ago. He was an oral surgeon, and he wanted to specialize in wisdom tooth extraction. That was his niche. That's what he wanted to do. Right. So I started talking to him. He lived in the Midwest, and he lived in a town of like 4,000 people, and the surrounding area wasn't much bigger. And I said, okay, so you're going to do wisdom teeth extraction. That's all you're going to do. He's like, yeah, that's it. So we ran the numbers and projected, and I said, you're going to run out of customers in 6.5 years. And, and that kind of helped him realize that, okay, specializing in something that's one and done, like, you get your wisdom teeth out once, that's it. You don't get repeat buyers. That's a hard model to really operate in. And so I think it's so important, as you were talking about this, just to really put some meaning to that. Because I think as leaders, I always say this, one of our currencies in leadership is our credibility. Yes. And if what comes out of my mouth is credible, people will follow me, right? If I tell my kid at the grocery store 15 times that we're going to go to the car, if they do it again, pretty soon my kid learn that, okay, he's not taking us to the car. That guy's words are garbage. And so we do this as entrepreneurs, right? We say these things, we haven't put the thought behind them. And this process, I feel like, puts some credibility behind our words. And that's so important to leaders.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Consistency with our words. It's called action, and we're judged by our actions. In fact, you can do this with your customers too. I believe that we should trust people's wallets, not their words. I don't know if you've ever done this in the entrepreneurial space or in any space where you tell someone, hey, I'm thinking about doing something, like, here's a new product I'm going to bring out. Or maybe even with your friends, where like, hey, I want to go on a vacation. I want us all to go on vacation together. And people are like, yeah, it's awesome. And everyone gets all excited. And you're like, this is awesome. We're doing this. And then it falls flat, because words are very simple. And words, we also realize there's a social appropriateness to be enthusiastic about things. I love your product because that supports you. I love the vacation idea because it supports you. But people speak the truth through their actions, and in this case, their wallets. If you tell people, hey, we're all going to go on vacation together, who's in? People are like, I'm in. Say, okay, everyone deposit right now. Then it's like, I got you on the calendar. The truth starts coming out through that action. Same thing with creation of a product or offering. If your customers are willing to open their wallets on your idea, that means they back that idea and they want in. So always measure action.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. All right, man, that is awesome. All right, so Mike, just final thoughts. What are some things? I always like to kind of do a catch-all as we kind of wrap up here. What's something that we missed that we should have brought up or talked about that we didn't?
Well, I think not that we missed it really, but I think we have to just appreciate the human element, and instead of trying to fight who we are, channel who we are. When I wrote this book, I realized that we trust our gut and instinct, but backfill it with logic so it feels right. And often it misguides us. But I think we shouldn't be punitive of ourselves. We should simply use as a beacon, a call to action. So when I feel I should do something, run those Facebook ads, make that hire, whatever it is, feel it. I then need to go seek out data. And that's when this book comes into play. You just look at the hierarchy of needs, identify where it is, you extract the empirical data, and it tells you how to get the data. And it's usually extremely quick and simple. And then you can make a really thoughtful judgment as opposed to a gut instinct judgment.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so huge too, because again, we can always come up with reasons for why we don't do things and or why we do the things that we do, and they're all reasonable, like when we look at them intellectually on the surface, but when we dig deeper, there's always some other things there at play. So I love that, just really factoring in the human element of this for sure. So so Mike, for those of you or for my listeners here, before I get into kind of how they get the book and everything, just one thing I want my listeners to recognize is just in going through this book, we not only looked at what's the next thing that we need to fix, we started creating some parameters, and it really kind of illuminated some things that we were doing in our sales process that where we had gotten away from certain processes and certain things had become very fuzzy, where we were really trying to win a war on a lot of different fronts from a sales standpoint in lead generation, that really taking a more targeted, focused approach. I think we're starting to hone that in and recognize we've got a team meeting coming up to really dive into those things and recognize that. And that's from like literally 15 to 20 minutes of just diving into this. And I just rallied the troops and said, all right, guys, like this is it. This is where we've been going wrong. Let's look at this and go through that. And I got a sense of excitement from that as well. And so, it kind of just rejuvenated me. And this is a time where, people can always use some rejuvenation. So I wanted to just point that out to people that, there's a lot of just rich nuggets in the book. And it's as Mike's books are, very to the point, very simple, very straightforward. So really enjoyed going through that. So Mike, where can people get the book? Where can they go to get more information?
So everything's at fixthisnext.com. There's information on the book. There's ways to get it. But I think the most valuable asset there's that free evaluation. So if you go to fixthisnext.com, you can take the evaluation right now. You can evaluate your business and within 5 minutes pinpoint on what you need to start working on.
Absolutely. I love that. So listeners, again, you guys, I know you guys are readers, you guys are growers, you're learners. Go in there, take some time right now, take the assessment, get the book. And this is all about, we talk about growth and freedom. And look, this not only helps us grow, but it creates freedom, because when we manage the two finite resources that we have, our time and energy, really great things can happen. And we realize that, look, we don't have all the time to do everything that we could do in our business, but having some guidelines to really what's the next thing for us to do does create that freedom. It does allow us for growth, because now we're really channeling our efforts in an area that we know is going to make an impact for our business. So I'm really excited about this, you guys. You'll see all the links and everything in the show notes. And again, check out Fix This Next as soon as you possibly can. Do the assessment. I promise you, you guys will not regret it. So Mike, I appreciate you taking some time. I know you're really busy. Thank you for doing the show.
Brandon, thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Awesome, man. All right, guys. Well, we'll talk to you again next week on another leadership topic. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Take care.